As we transition from the world wars into the next major conflict, knowing the main contributors is important. With a war that is a fight between communism and democracy, it is a clear indicator that the US and Russia fits that description. In this video, we will talk about these countries and their leaders. The United States was notorious to sticking to themselves. Nationalism kept them minding their own business until things got out of hand. Contrary to the world wars, the US was actually a main contributor to the start of the Cold War. They were heavily against communism and wanted all countries to be free. Many citizens opposed this, especially just coming out of a devastating war. On top of that, FDR had passed. This led a new president to take charge, particularly one who was not very well liked. This new leader was no other than Harry S. Truman. Harry S. Truman was our 33rd president. Besides the conflict with Russia, he is known for ending World War II with Japan by using the atomic bomb, to which he really knew nothing about. His biggest document during his term was known by the Truman Doctrine. This was related to the Monroe Doctrine, which at the time had to do with freedom from the Great Britain. The Truman Doctrine hoped to provide aid to Turkey and Greece in an attempt to block communist expansion and preserve democracy.
Soon after the end of World War II, the Cold War with the Soviet Union began.
Truman knew of the threat of the rise of communism out of Moscow, but also understood the best way of dealing with that is to rebuild Europe. Rebuild it economically, rebuild it culturally, rebuild it politically, and make it part of the alliance.
The Marshall Plan provided economic aid to the countries of Western Europe. After the introduction of the Marshall Plan came the Berlin airlift. In response to Stalin's decision to blockade the city of Berlin, the airlift was an incredible success. It showed that the United States was committed to protecting the nations of Western Europe from the incursions of communism.
During Truman's first term as president, his approval ratings plummeted when the United States became involved in the Korean War.
People were exhausted by war and the sacrifices that had been made. And he faced the prospect of running against the greatest American hero of World War II, Dwight Eisenhower, who was kind of everybody's grandfather and everybody's hero.
On the opposing side, we now will look at Russia. After World War II, Russia felt a great sense of power. They were one of the biggest communist states and wanted to expand even more. To start this expansion, they had an idea to take over Greece and Turkey, which were pivotal for grasping other areas around them. This was led by the ruthless Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin led a very successful career in Russia. During their civil war, Stalin looked over the establishment of the Soviet Union. After that came into play, it was led by Vladimir Lenin. Being Lenin's right-hand man, Stalin took over after his death. Stalin joined the Allied powers during World War II to defeat Germany, but returned to be the enemy soon after it was over. This was due to his idea of spreading communism and destroying the United States.
With the use of the atom bomb, the Allies did not need the help of the Soviet Union in defeating Japan. Stalin felt betrayed, and with the rivalry between the ideologies of capitalism and communism reignited, he grew more suspicious and paranoid of the West. The Cold War had begun. East Berlin and Eastern Europe, which were occupied territories by the Soviet forces, were transformed into satellite states, forming a bulwark between the Soviet Union and Stalin's former allies. As his health deteriorated in the early 1950s, and after an attempted assassination, Stalin's paranoia increased even to the doctors looking after him, which he had tortured to confessions of poisoning. He also ordered the head of the secret police, Lavrenti Beria, to investigate a new purge of the Communist Party, panicking members of the Politburo into wondering if they would be executed. Before this could happen, Stalin died of a stroke on March.
Now that we understand the key players, our next lessons will go over the events that took place during this war and what happens after.